I just edited my last video and I seem kind of out of it. I seem a little bit low. I don't necessarily feel quote unquote depressed, but I can see there's a difference in my demeanor for sure. So I want to see if I can improve that somehow or feel somewhat more free than I actually feel. And so I'm thinking of just making a video of insights, random insights from what I've written down to see how that makes me feel. Insight number 1. The problem is the way of looking that asks people for ready-made answers. We who go into map consciousness have interiors full of energy that is not yet manifest. Bring that out as that increases consciousness of humanity. It doesn't matter what understanding you unfold. The point is to unfold meaning, not particular meaning. The ego is the conglomeration of the particular meanings we've been given to identify with. Matter is how consciousness transforms itself, and life is the algorithm. Put your visions into play in your life. Think differently. Allow some energy to think you. See differently. Allow some energy to see through you. So I got bored of that idea of saying random insights pretty quickly. So I've been sitting here pondering how to approach all of this. My current living situation, having these notebooks full of insights that I'm attaching some importance to, not having the space to really do the same process of self-dialogue in order to unfold some of them, wondering if they really are that important, wondering about action as opposed to words. And the main goal I had was to talk myself out of the mental health system, and I did that. So is it time to switch gears? And I've talked about this several times with myself, but then I usually end up going back to feeling like I need to continue with the self-dialogue. And maybe I do to some extent, but it's possible that it needs to atrophy. And I'm realizing this too because I'm not connecting as much with my family because I have this urge for self-dialogue. So I came up with some thoughts to type up my notes, which doesn't really require personal space the way self-dialogue does, and also possibly writing a book, or I'm not sure, but I'm feeling like maybe these last 20 videos or so I will talk myself out of self-dialogue and move into action. And I have talked about this to myself, but I'm seeing that there are a lot of insights and it would be a lot of time and energy to try to catch up, and maybe it's not necessary. Maybe it's a lot of repetition. And I was also thinking about if I create a business, then at least maybe that way I'll learn to create a business instead of just creating self-dialogue. So I was thinking about continuing the self-dialogue until September 11th, but not really worrying about what I'm going to talk about in particular in terms of the insights. And then perhaps typing up insights over time, or going through it and seeing if there is anything that I do really want to talk about, but not making that the primary emphasis. sure if the wind blowing like that is agreement, or I think it is agreement. It was a strong wind reaction from the universe. So I came up with a couple possible business names, and that's sort of the step that I'm hung up on, is the name of the business, which is kind of silly considering I'm really used to creating a lot of different words, and context is just difficult to narrow it down into one word. So I might get some advice from a friend or two and then just do it, because I think the naming process is like 30 to 50 bucks. And if I screw that up and I have to submit a different name, then oh well. It's just part of it. And maybe self-dialogue would become interesting again if it was something that was moving alongside of creating something, like business or something. I don't know what. And I really like the word synchronicity, but it's probably taken for a business, so I created a word out of the word synchronicity. I created the word synchroversity, which is something to do with a discovery learning community for visions, special messages, and synchronicity, creativity, learning. I already said learning. Because I want to move into creativity, and then I wrote down that synchroversity is a place. It has verse in it, like universe. It has city in it, kind of like university, but also like city, and synchro as part of synchronicity. And I realized that the word chronicity is in synchronicity, and syn, S-Y-N, stands for without. So synchronicity is without chronicity. So that's another reason I kind of liked the synchronicity word, is because that is what my main focus in life is, in a way, is moving away from the chronicity associated with labels of mental illness. So synchronicity without chronicity, and then synchronicity being that really cool experience of connecting meaning, seeing meaning, and moving in the field of, in a way, adding something creatively meaningful to a perception in order to create an excuse to move towards it and look further into it and be curious about it. So it's the curiosity, it's the wonder, it's moving in that field as opposed to the known and the past and the self. And synchroversity has the word verse in it, like a song, and it has ver, and it has ver, which is the Spanish verb to see, and I'm all about seeing and perception. And it also sounds something like it could be related to self-dialogue. A synchroverse could be one's universe synchronizing with one's own meaning and one's own voice, creating your own universe of context. And a universe, a you and I verse, is kind of like a dialogue. It's a verse, and verse is also converse, so it's to do with talking. So I kind of like this word because it sounds like what it's supposed to be, all put into one, and sounds sort of like university, like a learning community. Synchronize with your unique voice. And there's a couple more things I want to say. If somebody would just turn off their GD motorcycle. Okay, they heard me. And synchroversity also makes it sound like it's not just about one person, but it's sort of a community, a city. And yeah, another thing I wanted to talk to myself about is how, now that I've talked myself out of the mental health system, I feel like it's possibly important to not continue to utilize the process I use to move away from the mental health system as much, because the point was to be able to be more in touch with life and live life, not just sit and talk about insights about life. And I could change my mind tomorrow, but that's how I feel right now. I was just trying to think of the word that I created, which was dia-improvalog, which was more related to being in action in life. So I need to move from dialogue to dia-improvalog. And part of the dia-improvalog is creating a business and just pretending and going along with it and learning as I go. And the other thing I was thinking about synchronicity was one has to follow the synchronicity in order to live in the world of synchronicity. So it would be a practice of following synchronicity as opposed to ready-made plans. So this next part could actually be an exercise in synchronicity and then creating something around that in a creative way for creativity. So living creatively and then also having a business to back it up. And the self-dialogue would have been the process I used to get to the point where I'm able to live in that way. And the last thing I want to say that I was thinking about in terms of this company, since I don't know what I'm doing, this self-dialogue in a way is a lot of what I have as ideas that I can't create by myself. And the wind is really blowing again, so I think it likes this idea that it's really an invitation for co-creators and collaborators from whatever I talked about, because I can't remember anything. So it'd be nice if people just came up to me and said, you said this and you wanted to create this, remember? I'm here to participate in some way. And go from there, because I don't know anything. My memory is my dialogue on my phone with myself, and it's not in my brain at all. So just putting it out there, to me, this feels like maybe this whole time I was talking to myself in order to just invite co-creators, and also co-creating the path to having a clear nervous system, and also creating something where I could invite co-creators. So yeah, this is an invitation to co-create in some way and co-create this business, because I know nothing about business. And being in the business of unfolding meaning and learning and creating and synchronicity and all the things I've said to myself along the way that I just can't remember. So I created a word called C-minder and me-minder. And I think I'll create one called we-minder, which is other people reminding me instead of me trying to have to remind myself. So I could watch these videos to try to remind myself, or I could just put it out there and ask for we-minders and co-creators and people who resonate with some of these weems and who have been in these states themselves. So that's the invitation, and maybe I'll unfold that more in the next videos, because I do think that I will go for 400 in the year period until, which is September 11th, and then go from there.